Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2026 officially.
Woo!
It's like weird because we're welcoming you in the future because it's December 23rd, 2025 while we're recording this. But anyway, this is 26 episodes. So we are here to kick off 26 with you. Let's do it, Sarah. Do you want to start by maybe sharing personal 26 stuff? Let's talk about what are you most excited for maybe in 26 and then like a goal or a change or something like you're trying to do going into the new year.
Yeah, well, good news about 2026 for me personally. It literally cannot be any worse than 2025 was. Um, Ash, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure a handful of our listeners do as well. 2025 was extremely rough for me personally, and I am really just so excited for a fresh slate in 2026 and to really be able to focus on me because that was also something that did not happen in 2025. I barely had capacity for myself, and I'm hoping that 2026 will be much different. So I'm excited for more focus on myself and my personal growth and my health. And then a goal that I want to, or something that I kind of want to change in 2026, a little personal, but a little podcast related as well. I want to be like less low key about the podcast and the United She Stands platform that we've created. I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I'm like a little shy about it. And that I feel like I just need to get rid of that. I've gotten better over, the 3 years and some change that we've been doing this, but I want to be like totally like unapologetic. Overall, want to be less shy about the podcast and more willing to kind of promote it out in the wild.
I love that for you and for us.
Thank you. Your turn.
My turn. So I just told Sarah before we hit record, I haven't thought about 26 because I can only think about something like 72 hours in advance to it happening
Which is one of my least favorite things about her. It's
because
so
my
annoying
life
for
feels
planning.
constantly chaotic. So I'm just like, if it's not happening the next 72 hours, I actually can't think about it. But I say that, and then that's like so not true in regards to like the podcast and like other
Yes.
aspects of my life. So like I'll just maybe say personally, there is something me and my husband Nick have talked about doing, and that's we're gonna try to be kind of more intentional with like cooking because we both get in like very big grooves where like we'll do so good. We'll like prep food on the weekends and then like we go weeks without like we're like every night like what's for dinner. Well, it's just like so annoying. I that conversation. I'm sure everyone listening can relate. Like every night, what are we eating? And so we're gonna try to like both cook one meal each on the weekend. It can be like Saturday or Sunday. Or Friday, whatever. But like the weekend, we each have to cook one meal. That way, we have leftovers through the week, and then throughout the week we jointly kind of have to share cooking one meal at like some point. So it's like 3 meals a week, which with leftovers should get us, 4 or 5, maybe 6 meals. So that's the one thing we really talked about. And then the other thing was like putting our phones down in the evenings when we're with our kids. So we're not too bad at it. I don't think there's nights obviously that are worse, but he loves video games. And so when he's playing video games, it's like very easy for me to like just sit and scroll on my phone. It drives me crazy. Like I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. If my kid asks me a question, he shouldn't have to ask me more than one time. And so we're going to just try to basically like put our phones away or in an office or whatever from like a certain hours in the evenings we're going to kind of set for ourselves. So those are our like personal things, but that's literally as far as I've thought about into
That's
26.
great. I love
Um,
those though.
yeah. So, and then yeah, I think for the podcast we have like so many goals.
I can start.
Okay.
Expect more trivia nights from
Yes.
us, and
Yeah.
we are hoping to expand outside of our Summit County and Columbus based trivia nights. So hopefully you'll see us in other parts of the state of Ohio. So there's
Yes.
that.
Love that. We are actively working with a Senate candidate, Ohio State Senate candidate, so not like US Senate, to like have them guest kind of host trivia with us. It's basically like I want to say 90% sure. It's just like we don't have an official venue, which is what we're trying to nail down. So that's exciting. That's in a different part of Ohio than we've been in. And then, yeah, we have another one in a different county that we're working with a really great local organization on nailing down dates. So all of that is to come. We're aiming to have, I think, basically in the first half of the year, like 3 live events of some sort.
Yeah.
The third one is a big shot, but we are not really going to say it yet. But we have very big dreams and hopes for like a bigger May or June event. So hopefully that comes to fruition and we can share it sooner rather than later.
Yes.
And then as far as like podcast episodes go, we are really going to be focusing on Ohio. Still some federal and like general US politics stuff, but it's a big year. 26 is a big year for elections, and we have a lot of big races in Ohio that are running. And so we're going to be focusing on what's going on at the state house. If we have local stuff going on, we're going to talk about it. And then, of course, we have federal elections as well. Every House of Rep is up, and then Ohio has a Senate race. So there's going to be a lot of Ohio focus for sure. We started December, our first monthly Ohio specific episode. We are going to continue those in 26. We have them on the calendar already. Once a month, we will have an Ohio politics, basically like update what's going on, what's happening in the state house, what you should be paying attention to episode. So still general politics stuff everyone should kind of be aware of, but like definitely turning our focus to doing what we can to help flip Ohio blue in any way possible.
Yes, literally anything. We'll do anything. But yeah, all around, you can expect to see more of us in 2026, so have no fear.
Yeah, we'll be releasing also like a monthly bonus episode. So we initially did that for like subscribers only. We want to kind of open that up where like everyone can have the bonus episode. There might just be some ads in the ones if you're not a paid subscriber. Cool. All right, should we now dive into the actual topic for today?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first, I want to say that I have been writing this episode for 6 months. Not really like actively writing it, but this episode, like, I can't even remember when I first was like, Sarah, I want to talk about political apathy. Like, it drives me crazy. I want to talk about people who are apathetic to politics, and like, why the hell are they apathetic? You know what I mean? What's going on? And it just so happened that we had such amazing guests constantly reaching out to us, being like, hey, can I come on the show? Can I come on the show? That we were like, we just kept putting this episode off. So
good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. And honestly, we could have pushed this off further. Like, that's how many great guests we have already lined up for 26. But we kind of wanted a 26 episode kickoff with just the two of us. So we're going to talk about political apathy today.
Just some light topics to bring in the new year. Yes. You know us.
Yeah. So we started the episode by kind of looking forward at 26. But now I want to start real quick by looking back at 25. So for the rest of our conversation today, I think that I want to kick it off with this little thread post. Threads is Instagram's like basically Twitter for those that don't know. So we shared this actually on our Instagram on December 22nd in like one of those roundup posts. But I think this summarizes 2025 in a way that leads us really into the topic for today. So the post said, what's most disturbing about 2025 is the number of people who seem undisturbed. Sarah, vibe check.
Like, it's so spot on. Like, now granted, I will say over this year specifically, I have seen a lot more people start engaging in politics, or at least engaging in like political posts. But there is still a crazy amount of people that are undisturbed by what has happened this year. And that alone is quite disturbing.
Yes, it's just, I saw that and I was just like, this is one of the most true. And I think like frustrating and encompassing things, because it's like no matter what issue you're talking about or what the hell's going on, it's like that hits for everything almost.
Yes.
So I think this was back to what I said earlier. This was a question or like a thing that I was asking like last election. I was asking, in the winter, in the spring, as stuff was unraveling, like, how are people not giving a shit, basically? Like, what is going on? How do we make people care about this? How do we make people care about like other people? Like, if it's not impacting them directly, how do we make people care about other people? Why does it feel like, you know what I mean? Like, why does it feel like they just can like disengage in this and live their lives daily?
Right.
So of course I went looking for research. Anyway, we're going to get into that. So maybe if you're listening to this, you've been thinking this too. Like, what is it going to take for people to get engaged? And maybe even like, why aren't they engaged? So today we're going to talk about that apathy, that political apathy. We're going to talk about what it is, why Americans have become increasingly apathetic towards politics, why this apathy is like important and how bad it really is for our democracy, why we're worse off as a country for it. And then we're going to end with just some general ideas. They're nothing crazy or new, but like we're going to try to put a bow on it and say like, here's what we have to do to kind of turn this around, really.
Exactly. So before we do any of that, let us define political apathy. So apathy itself is defined as a lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern. So political apathy specifically refers to the lack of interest or engagement in the political process among citizens. So this includes information apathy, and a lack of interest in general elections and even political events, and voting are one bare minimum ask as a citizen. So it manifests in various forms of disengagement. So this includes not voting, not staying informed, avoiding discussions about political issues altogether, not wanting to touch politics with a 10-foot pole, which is often what I say about me pre 2019. So this episode, as I was reading through the outline, really hit home for younger Sarah. And all that to say is, I totally get it where these people are coming from and why they are politically apathetic. But we are also here today to explain why that is not okay and why it is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe if you're listening to this, you're like in groups that are very not apathetic about politics. So maybe you're like, is this really a problem? And I mean, I think most people know it is, but let's just pretend you're asking that question. So let's look at kind of where are we at? Like, what are some of the data points we have? There was a Money with Katie newsletter, which we subscribe to, where she explains that news avoidance is at record highs, with 42% of Americans reporting sometimes or often avoiding the news, citing that it's too much or too negative as their top reasons. And that's from a Bloomberg article dated November of 25. So I know what some of you are going to say. Like, news avoidance doesn't necessarily equal like, apathy towards politics. Sarah just defined it. Information apathy or like information avoidance is part of political apathy. So we can't really separate those two. The news or like consuming information is how folks outside of an election most generally actually engage in politics. It's how they stay informed about political developments, policy decisions, and election information. So, like Sarah defined it, this is a piece of political apathy.
And I do want to say there is a difference between taking some time from doom scrolling and being informed via the news, or not watching certain news channels, or, time boxing your time and energy that you are putting towards watching the news or finding information about what's going on in the world. There's a difference there. Yeah. It is totally okay to take a step back. What Ashley was saying with her and her husband for their 2026 goals. Let's put our phone away for a couple hours. Like that's not the same thing as information apathy.
Yeah, that's a good call.
So again, all that to say, yes, this really is a real issue. And we can also look at the voter turnout rate to understand really how apathetic folks are. Really. So the voter turnout rate indicates how many eligible voters participated in an election. So it's the total number of ballots cast in a jurisdiction divided by the total number of eligible voters in that jurisdiction. So the highest voter turnout we have ever had in the last 20 years was 66.6% in the 2020 election. And the lowest was a whopping 36.7% in the 2014 midterm. So truly think about that. That means anywhere from 33% to like 63% of eligible voters have not participated in various elections. That is a ginormous amount of people.
Yeah. And like, no shame. Like, I definitely was a 2014 stat there. Like, I did not
100%.
participate in the 2014 midterm. So yeah, this is not to shame. This is just to say, like, this really is where we're at, and this is a problem. So I think one thing we want to be clear about when you look at like voter turnout is that some non-voters are not necessarily apathetic, right? We know that voter suppression is real. So a little bit older data here, but we know in 2016, 4% of registered voters did not vote because of quote unquote registration problems. That could be of various things, but that was according to the Pew Research Center. Many would-be voters we know face a range of barriers. Voter ID laws, registration difficulty, or criminal records all play into like if someone is able to vote. Access to the ballot, we know, right? Like if you can get to a voting booth, access to mail-in ballots, all those things play a role.
May I offer a very real example for the state of Ohio real quick? Our buddy old pal, Governor DeWine, just signed in, I forget the numbers, but a law basically saying that, so before this law was enacted, there was a 4-day window after election day that the ballots would still be counted if they were delivered up to 4 days after election day, as long as they were postmarked by election day. So that's a great little wiggle room. We know the reality of snail mail, especially around an election where there are an increased, I would say just increased mail overall because of the option to vote absentee. Governor DeWine and the legislature of Ohio have totally removed that 4-day window. So now any ballots that are received after Election Day, even if it's one day and it was postmarked by Election Day, it will not be counted.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, truly, there's so many things that honestly Republicans have done in the last couple decades to like fight access to the ballot. And this is like obviously voter suppression goes back. I mean, we have Jim Crow laws, we have all that, but like truly in the last couple decades, the attacks on ballot access have been insane. It's diabolical. It's awful. It's completely anti-democratic.
Yes.
But that is the state of the current Republican Party. So we're not going to get into that today because we could rage.
We could. Yeah. Let me tell you, we'd be here for hours.
2 hours because we could. But we're not going to. We say all of this to just say that like we today, this conversation, are focusing on the folks who have access to that ballot and like don't have registration problems and like they're choosing not to vote. That's who we want to talk about today. So, we just want to be clear here. We know, for example, the wealthier are like more likely to vote than folks who are poorer. Like those are all things like you're not going to hear in these stats today, but we can't necessarily tie some of that to apathy. And that's because, like we just talked about, wealthier people have easier access to a ballot box. So like just if you hear some of the data and stats we talked about today, that is why we are choosing. There's a very specific like research that we are like looking at, and it's specifically looking at voter apathy versus voter turnout. And that's why we're going to talk about it that way. So I just wanted to be clear. I know we're using voter turnout numbers, which are like indicative of apathy, but they're not necessarily like a 1-for-1.
Right, for sure. So now that we covered that not all non-voters are all apathetic, many of them are, but truly this isn't a new problem, unfortunately. So studies indicate that political apathy has been increasing in the United States since the 1970s. And contributing factors include declining neighborhood cohesiveness, the commercialization of political candidates, sensationalist media coverage, and a growing distrust in politicians, intensified by historical scandals. I mean, cannot blame people for wanting to be politically apathetic because of these extremely, valid factors.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know folks are apathetic, but why? Let's talk about why. So like I mentioned, to understand why, we're going to specifically look at those non-voters who chose not to vote. And the Knight Foundation did a study of U.S. non-voters in 2020. That is where most of this data comes from. There's a couple other, obviously, sources. We'll have these all in the show notes. But that study found that non-voters who opt to not vote can be found basically across the political spectrum at every level of education and income and from every walk of life. So while like maybe socioeconomic doesn't play as much into apathy, and this is where like we were very big on the disclaimer, we're not saying it doesn't play into ballot access or like voter turnout, because it can, but they're saying socioeconomic doesn't play as much into apathy as like other things do. So all that to say, they did find themes among these people. So maybe they don't fit into like these boxes based on gender or education or whatever, but there were general themes. So the first theme was that many non-voters basically just suffer from like a lack of faith in the election system and have doubts about the impact of their like votes. They just think like the election system doesn't work and their vote does not matter, which I don't think that's shocking. I feel like when I went into this, that's what I expected to like hear or see. So 38% of non-voters are not confident that elections represent the will of the people, and non-voters are also more likely to say that this is because the system is rigged. Non-voters are also less likely to believe votes are counted fully or accurately. So that's not surprising, but that is the reality of where we're at. And all the election denial bullshit doesn't really help this cause. And you think that's not intentional. It is. So when non-voters who reported a lack of confidence were asked why they feel this way, the top reason given was, just like I said, the perception of the elections was that they were rigged or corrupt. 27% of people felt that way. And then followed by issues with the Electoral College and or the popular vote not determining the outcome of a presidential election, which was 25%. And I think that's really interesting because that feels, I want to say, like an easier fix than like perception of elections being rigged, right? Like,
right.
You can
abolish the electoral.
Right. You can, that's a process. You could change that process. You could fix that process. I mean, I'm not saying that's easy. That's huge and ginormous. And a thing that we know, like getting buy-in for would be tremendously difficult, but because it protects those in power. Like, of course, anything that protects those in power is going to be hard to do, but it's a process. It's not just like this nilly-willy perception-y thing where we have to like change sentiment. It is a process that could be changed. So I have quotes here from two of the non-voters about the Electoral College. The first is this: Because of the Electoral College, our votes really don't matter. That's a male non voter from Las Vegas. And then the second one was, I've only voted twice in my life. The reason being that you can vote for whoever you think you like, but it's the Electoral College that gets them in there. That's why I don't vote. And that's a female non voter from Charlotte.
The study also found that non voters were less likely than voters to believe that decisions made by the president and other elected officials in Washington do not have a strong impact on their lives. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the highest, non voters rated the degree of impact on their lives to be 7, whereas active voters averaged 8.1. The perceived impact differed by household income levels, with non-voters with a household income of $25,000 or less reporting an average score of 6.7, and then those making more than $100,000 reporting an average score of 7.5. So, all this to say, non voters don't really think it matters who is elected in office. They think their lives will truly just be the same regardless. A male non voter from Minnesota who was also surveyed said, people say it matters who the president is, and it does not. Your life will be the same no matter who the president is.
Yeah, so this study, like I read it, Sarah, just like from a high level, it really was focused on like president. I know it says like other Washington officials, but it really was focused, like people commented primarily on the presidency. And I think at the end of the day, though, this carries beyond the presidency. Like, I don't have data on this wasn't in the study or whatever, but like from personal experiences, we are online people and like we talk to other people online. And even in our lives, like I would just say this is a broader, like both parties are the same sentiment. Like we see that all the time. Both parties are the same. It doesn't matter. Both parties are the same, which we know is bogus, but it's perception. And that unfortunately is reality for people. So it's ultimately like that feeling that no elected official will ever truly like represent voters. They're always going to do whatever to like help themselves and not the people is kind of the sentiment of that.
Right. So the next reason for many non-voters is just a lack of interest in politics. And I can totally relate to this one. Like I said, like pre-2019, Sarah, this was 100% my reasoning. So this showed up in the study as particularly true for unregistered but otherwise eligible citizens. So among the unregistered non-voters, the single most common answer given as to why they chose not to participate in elections is simply lack of interest or concern. Some quotes here. Politics is like another language to me. I don't care about it and don't want to learn more about it. That was a female non-voter from Las Vegas. Another quote. I'm uninformed and my one vote won't make a difference. I would rather use my free time to do something else. That's a male non-voter from Las Vegas. And lastly, another quote. I'm more involved in my immediate life and my family. I don't care about politics. Female non-voter from Manchester. And this is how, especially that first quote, like politics is another language to me, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like there was a huge barrier to enter to even have a discussion about politics and even seem somewhat informed. I just felt like it was so out of my realm that it was not accessible for me to even have a conversation. So therefore I didn't even try.
Yeah. I think this is like a little like the information gap or like lack of information is like a little bit, I don't know, like it kind of plays into our two-party system a little bit too, right? Because at the end of the day, like you have so many people who feel uninformed. So they'll just go in and say like, I know I've been a Republican my whole life, or I know I've been a Democrat my whole life. And they'll go in and vote for everyone with a D or an R next to their name. And I think that's truly how, to be honest, like parties have hoodwinked voters. Like, right, like they know, like, for example, if I'm just going to use Republicans because we live in a red state.
Yep.
If you have these districts that are super gerrymandered, you know that your base is going to vote Republican almost no matter who you put up. Like that party can put up the worst candidate ever. They know they're going to win a Republican seat. And so like that is what happens. It's like people don't feel informed enough. It's too hard to know everything about what's going on. And so they're just going to go in and vote for like their party that they're loyal to or their party that they're typically affiliated with. And I think that's so detrimental, honestly, which I get it. Like to your point, Sarah, like it's hard. Like this is like, how much time do we spend trying to stay informed? And we don't know it all. Like,
right.
It is so difficult. And I think that, we'll talk about problems and solutions to these problems later, but like it's truly a very understandable thing for people to say like I'm not informed enough to vote or make a decision. Like that's a big decision, and if you don't feel like you know anything about either candidate or anything about the issue, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to participate in that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so we just talked a whole lot about voter apathy specifically. Why don't people show up at the ballot box? That is specifically voter apathy, not necessarily political apathy. So voters, people who do show up to vote, can also be apathetic towards politics. And to be fully transparent, it was someone in my family who votes all the time that is very apathetic towards politics in general outside of voting that actually like sparked this episode idea for me, because it frustrated the hell out of me that like they would vote and then they would say like, well, it doesn't matter, nothing's going to change, nothing can be done, and like they vote, and I shouldn't say they're like totally apathetic because they are very informed, but that's it. Like they don't engage any other way. They just say nothing can be done, but they don't try to to do anything. And so it's like, how do you make someone like this like, or why is someone like this? And how do you get them like to engage and to think that they can make a change? So anyway, that's just a little side note, but that was the inspo for this episode. So anyway, like I said, there's a large portion of the population that participates only sporadically and sometimes even like reluctantly. For example, like just voting to stop the other guy rather than like participating through regular sustained civic involvement. And to be honest, that's probably the majority. I mean, that is the majority of folks. It's not even probably, it is the majority of folks. So they may show up once every 4 years to vote in a presidential election and then go back to their lives where like they avoid the news or don't volunteer or plug into local organizations or communities, et cetera, et cetera.
This reminds me of, I don't even know, I don't remember the specific numbers, but like there was a stat that came out either like right around election day or right after election day and was like, who is running for president? Or like, is it Trump versus Biden in this election? And it's
Right,
like,
but people were like Googling that, like Trump versus Biden or something. Yeah.
yeah, like how many people Googled it on like the day before the election or something like that blew my mind. But like, yeah, this is essentially that. Yeah.
So these people who vote, but maybe are like politically apathetic otherwise, there's like a lot of reasons that could be too, right? So we know some of them include some of the stuff we already talked about with people who choose just not to vote, but then there's additional things like, for example, I think one of the biggest ones is the sheer enormity of just the problems we face. These are not problems an individual can solve. They are systemic problems. It's overwhelming. And when you look at it from like an individual standpoint, you just feel powerless and helpless. And so that obviously is very like a very good reason that people kind of just like throw their hands up and they're apathetic towards it. A second thing is just the increased like polarization and toxicity, which that shouldn't be surprising to anyone. It's exhausting. It's emotionally draining. It's emotionally draining and exhausting for the people who do want to pay attention and stay involved. Like I'm so sick of listening to Donald Trump. Like I can't watch the man just bash on Americans any longer. Like it's fucking awful.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it is polarizing on both sides. So that's just something that it has gotten that way. We've talked about that in past episodes. A lot of that has to do with like national media coverage versus local coverage, like it used to be and all that. But that's a reason people will kind of stay out of politics. And then last, sorry, you just kind of spoke to this one, but in general, there is still like a lack of understanding and education around like, not even necessarily that they feel informed to vote, but like they vote almost against their interest or because like they don't understand. Like our news doesn't do a good job of like explaining policy, right? We're grabbing headlines these days. We're not talking about like, hey, there's not like investigative journalism into like how healthcare in other countries works and why ours could do the same thing, but we just choose not to. And it's because a bunch of people make money off of it and they don't care if people die. It's like that kind of reporting and news and stuff isn't as available, I think, to people, or people aren't looking for it or whatever. So that lack of just understanding of like how policy actually impacts their day to day. So this list could actually keep going, unfortunately. But basically, this is kind of, if you kind of summarize everything we've talked about today, like so far, I think it's just like a fair summary to say that Americans are apathetic about politics because the system is broken and it's too complex. Like at the end of the day, I think everything we talked about summarizes up into that sentence.
That's exactly it. And the perfect example to be, talking about these crazy conditions about why people are apathetic is the political scene today. Everything that we've seen in the last decade was someone on the scene for the last 10 years. It's, talk about large, enormous problems and feeling powerless. Like it's right here in front of our nose. So it's totally understandable. But before we talk about how we can help folks move forward past this apathy, let's talk about why we should care that Americans are apathetic in general. So as we discussed, apathy leads to people not voting, even people who maybe vote today. Voting is critical in a democracy for ensuring accountability and protecting individual rights. We will be screaming this from the rooftops until the day we die. Low voter turnout can further entrench the power of existing political elites and really discourage future participation from those who feel unheard, aka voter turnout can decline and apathy can get even worse. All of this can create an unrepresentative government that does not reflect the will of the people. This underrepresentation can lead to more feelings of alienation and erode trust in the democratic processes. So, all that to say, political apathy is bad for our democracy and overall bad for our country. It can let those in power get away with anything. And do we need to look any further than the current administration, their consolidation of power, and the harm they are doing to everyday Americans to enrich themselves and the powerful elite?
I
I
don't think we do. But like,
think
are people
not.
looking, Sarah? Like, back to the point. Like, that's what I just want to know. Like, how
Yeah,
many people are paying attention?
I
Like,
know.
I just see people living their daily lives, which isn't like a fair thing to say because like we all are living our daily lives. We have
For
to. Like,
sure.
you have to keep going. But like, just because someone's not posting about it doesn't mean they don't know or they don't care. It's just
Yeah.
like, how do you know? Like, just because they're not involved in a local org doesn't mean they're not like staying informed with the news. And that's what I'm just so curious about. Like, a lot of these studies and stats are obviously like pre-Trump too,
Yeah.
and I'm like, has it changed? I don't know.
It's a hard thing
Just
to measure
I
and
know it
measure
is.
accurately. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem. Everyone knows the problem. So let's talk about what we do. How do we fix it? Well, simply put, we should just fix the system, don't you think?
Super easy. Yeah, just add
Easy.
it to our to-do list for 2026.
Yeah,
No
2026
problem.
goal, reform American democracy. Okay, but for real, we actually do have to fix the system. That's like the main thing. To fix political apathy, we have to have a system that works for the people. And so, at the end of the day, what has to happen is Democrats, if they really want to be the party of the people, the minute we get any form of power back, we have to use that power to
Yep.
fix things. And the good news is some of this stuff can happen at the state levels. We've seen states do this. We know like some states have independent redistricting commissions to deal with gerrymandering. We know Maine just did the whole like super PAC. You can't have more than like $5,000 from a super PAC or whatever from a campaign finance reform thing. So some states are trying to do this, blue states mostly, but it's like those are the kind of things like if we can do it if your state has the blue power to do it, your state better be doing it, and you better be pressuring your elected officials to do it. And then the minute we have any type of federal power, there are things that have to happen at the federal level. Campaign finance reform is one of them. We just talked about it, but like redistricting reform, the Supreme Court has to be dealt with. There need to be term limits there. There's so many things that need to be done on the Supreme Court. All of these are like reform items. And then our voting systems need reformed. We've talked about the Electoral College earlier. I think that's a perfect example. And we need to reform our voting systems. So, for example, countries with proportional representation, where parties win seats according to the proportion of votes they receive, tend to have higher voter turnout than those with winner take all systems like we have here in the United States. So basically, like we talked about earlier, the Electoral College makes folks feel like their vote doesn't really count because the popular vote doesn't win. And that's at the president level, but that can happen like at states too, right? Like if you have states, you could do proportional representation. So there's things like that. There's ranked choice voting, which we've talked about on here before, but it makes elections, basically you don't have to have runoffs. It typically brings more moderate candidates so you don't get extremes. There's so many good things that could be done around our voting systems.
Truly, like when you were reading about proportional representation and there's higher turnout with countries that actually have proportional representation, I was like, wow, what a dream.
I
And it
know.
sounds so simple and it sounds so like we should absolutely have that like as a basis to our democracy. But
We would have never had Trump to begin with. Hillary
I
would have
know.
won.
I know.
Not saying that would have fixed everything. Obviously,
Right.
there's a whole slew of different issues there, but like we would have never had Trump's America. So
Yeah, totally. And you also like, what's also interesting? I we've heard and talked about the whole, my vote doesn't matter, blah, 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 because of the electoral college. Like, I don't know why, but like it was crazy to me to hear that coming from a friend of mine who lives in Colorado. She votes blue, she votes all Democrat, but she was even like, yeah, like, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna go vote, but like, it doesn't really matter. It's all gonna go blue anyways, which is like what she wanted. But kind of hearing that shift of perspective, like, it's coming from both sides. And whether
yeah.
like you want it to turn out that way or not, you can still end up with the conclusion of, oh, my vote still doesn't really matter, even though it's,
I I
you know what I
actually
mean?
think if you don't live in a swing state, you feel that way. I mean,
Yeah.
haven't you ever felt that way? I feel that way. I'm like, I'm gonna go
Oh,
vote. I'm absolutely gonna vote. Like, of course, you know me. I'm trying to like, I believe Ohio can flip blue, but I'm like, at the end of the day, like, they're not even spending money here. Like,
right.
the presidential candidate's not even gonna spend money here because they know, like, they're
Ohio.
not counting on Ohio's vote. Like, they don't care. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's fair. Like, you're right. It's from both sides, and I think unless you're a swing state in the electoral college in a presidential race, you don't matter. Obviously, there's so many local races that do matter.
Right,
And
right.
that's what the other
Totally.
thing people need to realize in like state races and all that. But yeah, I think at the most part, I think that's a pretty common feeling for people.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about first we need to reform the system, the entire government. But
Shocking. I know, right? Who
I
didn't see that one coming?
right, exactly. But we also need to reach voters, both non-voters and folks who vote that are just truly unplugged otherwise. So folks need to understand what it means for ACA subsidies not to be extended. They need to understand what it means for tariffs to be in place. It's another like common Google search right after Trump was elected. What are tariffs? You know what I mean? And how do they affect me? We have a lot of issues and policy education to do, and we have to go where people actually are to do it. We won't go into more detail, but we know we have a social media reckoning on the left. We have to win online and not just in political spaces. Non-voters are twice as likely as active voters to passively encounter news versus actively seeking it out, which is why we need to find them.
Yep. So, lastly, I'm going to say something, and I already feel like people are going to come for me for this initial statement, but we need to run campaigns like Zorons and Aftons.
The name is Mamdani. Mamdnai. Did I spell that right?
I don't actually know. That's why I didn't sing it with you. But that song was stuck in my head for so long.
I know, same.
I shouldn't even say song, whatever that was, like clip.
It is a song. It's a banger.
So anyway, we have to run exciting campaigns. So I'm not saying that like every candidate has to be progressive like those two were, but like you saw the excitement around them. Everyone saw the excitement around them. They were all over social media, and they're all over their communities. Like they were hustling. They worked their asses off knocking on doors and contacting with people on the ground and all that stuff. Like
I live 2 states away from New York City, and I'm still singing that song about Sauron and how to spell his last name like almost 2 months later, like after the election.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's like, of course, I would love like to run a bunch of progressive candidates, but like, it doesn't matter. Any Democrat that runs needs to be someone who can excite the voter base. And like, they need to be real. They need to actually address and have policy stances that fight for Americans. They need to be fighters. Like, they need to be ready to do things differently than like Democrats have done. And that's why, you know, I think you hear a lot of this like establishment Dem versus new, whatever. It's like back to like, it doesn't matter. At least to me, it doesn't. Like, I think like every part of America is so different. Like, run a moderate, run a progressive. I don't care. Run whatever candidate, have good primaries. And like, whatever candidate is going to do the best in their primary should do the best in the general. That is how it should work. So, like, run good candidates, run candidates that aren't necessarily establishment though. Like, I think that is the one thing. I'm not saying every establishment Dem has to go, but if they're not willing to pivot and turn and fight differently than they've been fighting for the last however many years, like, then they do need to go. Yeah. We need to run candidates and platforms that just like excite people and give them hope for real change. And then, like, most importantly, when we win, like a Zoran, when we win elections, we have to deliver on that change. Like, it doesn't matter if we go and win a bunch of shit in 26 and 28 and we don't do anything, it's all for nothing. The next Trump 2.0 will rise on the right, and like, we will be back in the situation we're in. So we have to win, and then we have to actually do something once we win.
Yes.
Wild thoughts. Wild.
Let's win and then do what we said we were going to do.
Yeah, crazy.
Very actively try to do that. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, like, get creative about it. Like, Biden was thwarted by like the Senate filibuster. Biden was like so many different things. Like, get creative. I don't care what you have to do. You've seen what the right will do. They will do anything. They will break the law. I'm not saying break the law, but like, you better push it as far as you can to like do what we need to do to get the country back in order.
Like Gavin Newsom with his Prop 1. Or
exactly. I love that. Fighter. And I'm not on here going to be like, I love Gavin Newsom. I think he's fine. But like, he's absolutely fighting. He's one of the best people we have fighting right now. Like, one of the best elected officials.
Totally. So we want to end this episode with something from the book called 11 Writers and Leaders on Democracy, What It Is and Why It Matters. One of the authors, Elif Shafak, specifically touches on apathy. Elif is an award-winning British-Turkish novelist and storyteller who holds a PhD in political science and explains that for a true democracy to survive, it needs more than just access to the ballot box. She writes, in quotes here, "For a true democracy to survive and thrive, there has to be the rule of law, separation of powers, free media, independent academia, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, minority rights, and so on. Wow, that sounds like a dream. Continuing the quote, if all these components are damaged or broken, elections will only lead to majoritarianism. And from populist majoritarianism to authoritarianism, it is a swift fall. She continues to say, apathy will only make the crisis more acute. Apathy and numbness, the moment we stop caring about what is happening here, there, and elsewhere.
Yeah. So it's that classic chicken and egg situation, basically.
Yeah.
Folks don't participate because the system is broken, but we need folks to participate to fix the system, which is a very hard situation to be in, but that's where we're at.
We're in
So,
quite the pickle.
yeah, just a little problem. But all that to say, we're entering 26. I would say, if we can do it in any year, it is in 26. And so if you're in the game, you've been in the game, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being an active and willing participant in our democracy. Stay in the game, please, now and forever. And if you know folks who care, but maybe aren't in the game, or they are finally feeling fed up or whatever, like, help them. Reach out a hand. Say, like, hey, here's something I listen to, or here's how I stay informed, or hey, I go to these meetings once a month, like, join me. Let's go grab a coffee and talk about whatever. Like, be the bridge to that entrance. Tear down the barrier for them to enter into the political arena. Help them get involved. All of us doing that really can make a difference. So one other thing you could do, hint hint, is like, send them this episode so they understand why it's so important that they should get involved, that we can't get out of our chicken or egg or whatever. I don't even know. Can you get out of that? Like, or which one are we? The chicken or the egg? I don't know. Whatever it is, like, we need them to be one of the chicken or the egg. Like, we need them in the circle. We need them doing the thing so we can, like, break the cycle. So
Ashley's brain is gonna explode.
My brain's actually
about, are we the chicken or the egg?
Wait, are we the chicken or are we the egg? But anyway, reach out a hand, like, help them get involved. That is the best thing we each can do in our day-to-day lives, is like, reach out to the people we care about and ask them to help our communities and our country.
Absolutely. And as Ash said, sending this episode to them specifically is a great start. As always, thank you so much for being here for the last year of 2025. We know it's been a rough one, but here's to 2026 and fighting like hell to take any steps that we can to fix our broken system.
Thanks, y'all. See you next week.